any questions, comments, announcements about anything? One thing that students tend to ask about around this time of year is because you'll probably see information floating around about the commencement or the graduation ceremony that's coming up in May for our MOT3s, or the ones that are, most of them are finishing their level 2 fieldwork this week. Some people are finishing next week, and I think 1 or 2 people finished last week. But it's for them, for the class of 2021. And but our first and second year students sometimes ask, can they also attend? And usually pre-COVID, yes, it was kind of an open invitation. If you want to, sit through somebody else's graduation, you can, but attendance is going to be really restricted this year. They are saying we're doing it live, which is fantastic for those graduates, but they're going to try to keep it as small of a crowd as possible. So unless you are related to one of those people, married or sibling or something else, you're not going to be able to go to it. So I'll just tell you that. They hopefully, I bet they will live stream it though. So that could be, sometimes it kind of inspires the current students, because that'll be you in not too long from now. You're doubting me now, but I'm promising you it goes by like that. Okay, so if no further questions, we will get started. So let me stop sharing that. And what you need for today is in that course content folder for today, the one with the ladybug. And you are, what am I trying to speak and do something at the same time? There's a worksheet there that you're going to need. But you don't necessarily need it yet. So what I would prefer for you to really work on or make notes as I'm talking about the CAWA model is, I would like for you to fill in that last column of the long sheet that you've been working on, that theory and practice sheet. So you're going to just look for the overall philosophy, keywords, the background, that kind of stuff on this. And this one is really interesting. All right. So one reason I say that it's interesting is because it's one of the new, it's the newest one we are discussing. Now, as you noticed in doing that prep work for this course, session, there are tons of theories. Like I said the other day, there I'm sure well over 100 theories that are used in OT practice. Some of them are very old, some of them are not so old, some of them are very new and emerging. And this one is not emerging per se, although there is active research still going on with this one, but it's one of the more, I would call it a modern day theory. So I think that's one of the things that makes it so interesting. Another thing is, and you're going to find out about this, is there's definitely an international flavor to it. And I think that's really cool, because that makes it to where it's something, it's a model that actually lends itself to being discussed with some clients and caregivers and other professionals. So, unlike the other theories that we've talked about, you probably won't talk about that theory with the client. You'll just know it and use it to organize your own thoughts and planning for working with the client. But this one is different. It actually is therapeutic in and of itself. So you'll see what I'm talking about, because I'm going to actually kind of use it with you guys today, almost kind of like you're my clients for today. All right, so we are, hold on, I'm going to a Prezi. One second, I think I messed it up there. Okay, give me just a second on this. So let me see, what I may have you guys do is, Prezi did this weird thing. I don't know if any of you have noticed it, but they updated And so you have to reformat all of those things. So what I'm going to do first, actually, before I really get into it, is let you meet on video my friend, Dr. Michael Awama, who was the originator of, along with some other OTs, of the COWA model. And he's kind of the main voice of it today. And you can tell I'm a pretty big fan of his. All right, so I'm going to show you that. And then in the meantime, I will be fixing that Prezi link so we can talk about it more. All right. Okay, so I'm going to share. Here we go.
Well, hello, of course, to my very good friend and colleague, Ms. Imke Winkelman, who I love dearly, and we've been good friends for so many years. It is such a pleasure to be able to be involved in her class today, and it's just wonderful to be able to have this opportunity to connect internationally and to share these ideas across the Atlantic Ocean. So without any delay, let me just get into trying to answer the questions that you have given to me. These are all wonderful questions, and I think that there were 17 questions in all, but I've elected to just go through perhaps 5 or 6 of these questions, because I think that some of the answers and some of these questions are quite related. So by answering some of the questions, I may actually be giving answers for quite a number of the questions that you've put forward to me. And if I don't cover something and you really want to know an answer to a particular question, please forward your question to me again through Imke, and I'll be very happy to be able to answer them to the best of my knowledge. I hope that I speak English slowly enough for you to understand what I am saying, because my ability to speak Deutsch is very limited. So please pardon me for not being able to give this to you in your native language. The first question that was put forward to me about the COWA model is, number 1, can you please tell us something about the underlying theory, the Eastern perspective? Yes, absolutely. The Eastern perspective of life in general, of the universe, the relationship between the self and the universe and the environment, I believe differs very much from the way that you might see things in your philosophy in your part of Europe, your part of Germany. I want to just say that the basic view of how Japanese people view life and view the self and view the nature and the environment is very similar to the way that many of the so-called primitive people of the world also view the world. And I'm speaking specifically to the peoples of the world, for example, the Salmi people of northern Finland and Sweden, as well as the Maori people of New Zealand, the Aborigine of Australia, the Mapuche people of South America in the area of the world that we know as Chile, as well as the First Nations people of Canada, or often referred to as the American Indian of North America. All of these different peoples, and I believe also many people of the African continent, share a particular view or philosophy of reality, the cosmos, the world, the self, the universe, and so on, that differs quite a bit from how many Westerners or people in Western Europe have come to know and understand the world around them. The basic difference, if we look at the more old primitive view of the world, is one in which the concept of the self and the environment are instead of being two separate entities as they are in the Western world, the self and the environment, the spiritual world, the sea, the sky, the mountains, the ocean, people, animals, insects, snakes, bugs, trees, living and dead trees, all of this matter are all connected together in one inseparable whole. Okay, so everything is dependent on each other. And although everything is in flux or in a dynamic kind of movement and adjustment, everything is all together in one connected whole. Much of the writing that you come across in Buddhism, as well as in Hinduism, also speak of a similar view of reality in the world where everything is connected together. It was in Western philosophy that we begin to see the rationalization of our views of reality in the world. That is, that instead of everything all jumbled together and mixed together in one inseparable whole, that we see a logical separation of all of these different parts. And so, for example, there is a tendency for people in the Western world to hold a philosophical view that all things in the world around us, including ourselves, are made up of many, many, many different smaller parts. And all of these parts all fit together in a logical format. And we don't just do that about people and objects in the world, but also with regard to environments and space around us, as well as another dimension, and that is a dimension of time. I have to laugh a little bit when I think about my answer to this, because I remember the first time that Imke Winkelmann welcomed me to Germany and gave me instructions on how to get to Osnabrück from wherever it was that I was traveling from Frankfurt, I believe, from the airport. And I had to ride on the various trains on the Deutsche Bahn. And before I came to Germany, I learned that Germans are the world champions of rational thinking, that everything is very organized, everything is put together so very logically and efficiently and effectively. That's what Germany is famous for. At least that is a reputation that you have. There's also an expectation that your Deutsche Bahn system also runs exactly on time. And very much like your classrooms and the meetings that you have in Germany, where everything starts right at the time that it's supposed to. And I was astonished to find that the first train that I got on in Germany was actually late. So not very German, the Deutsche Bahn. Okay, I hope that's enough to give you some ideas about the differences in the Eastern perspective.
Okay, so let's stop there. I did link
quite a number of the
let's-
questions that you put.
I did link this website. I put it in the chat, but I also added it to today's course content folder. So you can go back and poke around there, some on your own if you want to later. There's some good history of the model, but let's talk about it, because I don't want to get you just to listen to a video while we're here together. So the Kawa model, as Dr. Wama was talking about, it's based on the idea that that relates much more closely to Eastern way of thinking rather than our Western way of thinking. So just to kind of simplify that a little bit, we have our way of thinking about quality of life. In fact, for a time, the AOTA philosophy or their sort of slogan was improving quality of life. And that always kind of bugged me because I thought it was very unidimensional. It was very Western in perspective and not global. And really not, in my opinion, it wasn't very culturally humble because it really just looked at our culture as a whole in the US, not even all of North America. In what our quality of life tends to be is so individual, what we see as that, what means quality of life for you and for me and for anybody else we know or pass on the street. And that's kind of why I had you guys do that 100 things list, which we're going to come back to that, so don't worry. In fact, you're going to use it in another course further on. But if you're wondering what the point of that was, it really kind of relates to, well, some of it was I wanted you to practice categorizing different occupations into different, areas of occupation per the OTPF. But also, I want you to think about how those things are part of what you must perceive as your quality of life, because you thought to list them. And some of those things, in looking at the ones I have so far, the lists I have, some of those things are very small components of your day, like brushing your teeth or making coffee in the morning, that kind of thing, feeding your dog. But some of them are bigger. Some of them are rituals in that they only happen at certain times, but they happen repeatedly, like maybe decorating a Christmas tree, if that's your spiritual beliefs or practice. And so it depends what each person thinks of as quality of life. And that's going to be true for each and every client you serve. And that is why I like this model, because it looks at the uniqueness or the individuality of that belief system. So what's the whole purpose of the CAWA model? It really looks at a person's circumstances and surroundings, and then their abilities and their goals, and it kind of churns all that stuff and looks at the inner relationship. And that's what Dr. Awama was talking about, that all of those things are kind of moving dynamically. So what you think your strength today might be, okay, if you say I have a really good hand strength, I can open every, jar or bottle somebody gives me, but then you get arthritis in your thumb, or you break your finger, or you have a hangnail and your finger hurts. So tomorrow that may be different, or next year or next decade for you. And in that way, it's dynamic, and even your values may change. And so we look at how all those things are related to each other, but they're also moving parts. And so to me, the picture that comes to my head when I think about that is a Rubik's Cube. And you can, twist it this way or twist it that way. And sometimes it lines everything up, but sometimes it totally unaligns it, or whatever the opposite is there. So that's what we're looking at with this. Here's Dr. Awama, and he is from Japan. He actually lived in Georgia for a long time, and he now is the program director of the OT program at Columbia University. So this is what I mean when I say it's more modern day. It's roughly, the same age that some of you all are, roughly, or maybe exactly. So why did he come up with it? What was the need for it? Because there wasn't really a model that represented a perspective outside of what we think of in our culture. So we needed to expand that. And that really is part of being culturally responsive. We're going to talk more about that in the next module in this course. So there's some words in here. You probably didn't know that you were going to learn a little Japanese in OT school, but you're about to today. The word kawa actually is Japanese for river. And so what the kawa model is about is a metaphor. It uses the river as a metaphor or a symbol to represent life. Okay, that last thing I said is important, so make sure you write it down. Kawa means river in Japanese, and the river is used to represent life in this model. So here are the major concepts, the things we're going to be talking about that have to do with this model and with the river. Obviously, water, the sides of the river, if you live on Mud Island, or, if you can kind of picture that. Then if there are rocks on the side or at the bottom, of course, there's driftwood. And then there's space in the water in between those things. So we're going to talk about each of those things. Let's start with the biggest one, the river. Now, in this model, the river represents life, and the river, or kawa, is seen as a journey that flows through time and space. So if we are using the Mississippi River as our river model, just because of where we live here, where we are here in Memphis, the Mississippi River starts in Minnesota, way up in the north part of our country. And it travels through so many states, and there's even some places where it meets up with other rivers. And this is one of my favorite words ever. That's called a confluence, meaning both of those are flowing together. And so that even now, Dr. Awama didn't say this, but I think that can symbolize like major things in your life. You could think of it as starting grad school, or meeting your significant other, or the birth of a sibling, or something like that is major in your life, that really kind of changes who you are, because it's not just the one river, it's the water of two rivers, even though it's what it goes into is still called the Mississippi because that's so big. I'm trying to keep from doing the quote off of Family Vacation when they're going across the river, and this is actually they're crossing the Mississippi River in St. Louis and going from St. Louis proper to East St. Louis, which is actually in Illinois. And he's saying it's the old man, the deep river, the mighty Mississippi. And he's saying all the nicknames for the river. That's what I'm picturing right now. So the optimal state of well-being, or what you could think of, what you and I might think of as a good quality of life, is when the river's flowing like it's supposed to. It's not dammed up. It's not super muddy or trash in it. It's beautiful. The flow is unimpeded. That's whatever we think of as a good quality of life, that's kind of the symbol for it, a freely flowing river. Now, the end of our life, if the Mississippi is our symbol, is going to be in New Orleans. And, where it kind of dumps into the Gulf. So it's very long and very windy. Now, here's your second Japanese word of the day, Mizu. That is the flow of the water. That's the water. And so think of the flow like I just was talking about. Now, when we think about water or Mizu, the thing about it is that its properties easily change. So if I have, say, a half gallon of water, if I pour it in a coffee cup, or pour it in a pan or a drinking glass, or pour it out on my front porch, in all those cases, it takes different shape really easily because of its, the way its chemical makeup. And so that's the thing about the flow of life. it changes a lot. And sometimes one little minor thing can change it all. So in other words, water or Mizzou adapts to the container just as people adapt to society and societal expectations. There's the picture. So the Mizzou or the water is what we're focusing on there. Now next, Toramaki. That's the sides and the bottom of the river. So you can see where the arrows are pointing, that kind of almost sort of butterscotch color there in the picture. Now that represents the context, the relationships, or what sort of holds or supports our life. So it's going to be, might be stronger or thicker or more prominent in certain areas and then less so in others. And that's just kind of how life works. Toramaki, that's the walls and the riverbed. Iwa, that's the rocks. I'm not going to quiz you on these Japanese words, by the way. I'll always give you both words if I'm talking about it. I'm not going to ask you what rocks is in Japanese, but I think it's interesting. Rocks are the what blocks it. Think about when you were a little kid and it rained in your neighborhood. Maybe you and the other neighborhood kids went out and made dams out of rocks and sticks and debris in the gutter of the street. My kids used to do that, and it would drive me crazy because they would leave that stuff there, and then it would, flow. The water would back up into the street or the driveway, and but that's what this is. The rocks. And some of the rocks are little, some of them are huge, some of them are smooth, some of them are jagged, so that changes the flow of the water. Whoops. I do not know what happened. I somehow fast forwarded that. Okay, so don't look if you get easily motion sickness here. Okay, so we're talking about the rocks there. Now, here's what I meant to do. So think about actual rocks, and those are barriers, they're risks. They're there and they sort of work in opposition to the walls and the riverbed are support. They become problematic in some cases, especially the bigger or more irregular, or if they're piled up together. So kind of thing, this could be, and they don't have to be, it doesn't have to be like a physical thing, like I broke my leg and I can't get up the stairs in my house to the bedroom. Obviously, that would be a rock, that situation in your life, but it can even be stress. And I think we all can relate to that. It could be insomnia. It could be, worry about finances. It could be stress about an upcoming test or, overwhelm about something. It could be grief. It could be sadness from the breakup of a relationship or, any of those things. So because it's a rock and that's tangible, that's something you can touch and see. I don't want you to think that the things the rocks symbolize are only of that description, because it can be anything that's getting in the way of the flow of the water or the flow of life. So this is how a therapist who is using this model, this is how they would think about the person that they're working with or their client. This is how they would decide what assessment tools to use, or even what to ask the person about in the client profile. To say, let's talk about your everyday life, and can you describe for me your living space, and is there anything there that impedes your ability to be independent or feel fulfilled? And then, if you notice in observations and in speaking to the client, if you notice that their balance is off, or maybe they have some kind of visual impairment or depression or any of this, then that would guide you in the direction of what specific assessment tools to bring out. So that's the rocks. The rocks are the barriers, whether it's physical barriers, social barriers, anything that's messing it up. Ruboko, that's the driftwood. All right, this one sometimes confuses people because they think the driftwood might be barriers, but actually on this model, what it is, the stuff floating around in the water, because the rocks aren't floating, that's the characteristics of a person, their skill set. So in other words, it's their client factors, TPF speak. Now they might be strengths or they might be challenge areas. So if somebody has a really good attention span, if they're resilient, if they have really good hand strength or balance, but then maybe they have depression or, their endurance is low because they've had COVID for 3 weeks. The driftwood is the things about that person. And so that's going to really kind of play into also how that river is flowing. Kind of like my example about the kids making the dam in the gutter. If you have a bunch of stuff, like if you take a big handful of grass, then normally grass would not be that much of just, like a handful of cut grass is not going to impede water from flowing unless it's a whole bunch of stuff, or you glob it up in one certain area of the water, then it's going to divert. So it would change the flow of that river. So these are some examples of what some driftwood might be for certain people. An example might be if somebody believes that it's a weakness to take medication, or maybe it's against their religion, their belief system. So your spirituality and your performance patterns come into play with this as well. How well does the person usually cope with change, that kind of thing. Now, the last thing, Sukima, that is the space in between what we've got going on in that river. So the river's flowing, we've got the water, then we've got the supports, the butterscotch stuff, the sides of the river and the bottom. Then we probably have some rocks and some driftwood, but the water that moving in between those things, that's where the therapy occurs. So in other words, you could think of this as, if someone says, okay, I'm in OT school and it's very time consuming and stressful for me, so I'm having panic attacks or a lot of anxiety, and that's keeping me from sleeping. If that somebody came, or we could say if, a client came to you and said, I have a lot of financial constraints and I can't, do different things that I can't buy exercise equipment, or I can afford a gym membership because I don't have the finances for it right now. So what I'm talking about is their driftwood and their rocks, but I can't really change that as the OT. I mean, I can't say, okay, well, don't worry about any of the obligations for OT school. That's fine. I can't say, well, let me give you $1 million and then you won't have any financial concern. So I can't necessarily change the rocks or the driftwood. And yes, driftwood have a negative or a positive impact. So both could be either a strength or a weakness or a problem, depending on if they're personal attributes, which is the driftwood, or if they are more contextual things going on in that person's life, the rocks. So the spaces between the driftwood and the rocks is what we think of as occupation or occupational performance. And that's according to this model. So think about it. If you have, maybe let's picture some part, maybe out in rural Missouri, where the river kind of narrows, Mississippi River narrows some. It's not as wide and mighty as it is here in Memphis. If you go downtown and look at it, it's maybe a little narrower and not as fast moving. And suddenly maybe there's a barge there and it accidentally dumps 1,000,000 bushels of corn there. And there's a bunch of trash and sticks and rocks, and there's a bunch of debris in there. So that is going to make it where the river may hardly even flow there. It may be really working hard to take its usual path. And in fact, it may even dredge out some of those river banks to make a different path because of the force of the water. So that, I mean, if you took a look at that situation I just described, you would easily see that occupational performance is very heavily impeded under this model. So it's the space in between the barriers, but also the strengths there. That's what occupation is, and that's what we can address or will address in our therapy sessions under this model. Why do we care about this model? Well, one thing, now I've told y'all a bunch of things that I like about this model, and this is another one, because the role of the therapist in this model is kind of like the coach or maybe the teacher, in that we explain the model to the client and then they identify, and we may help them if they need the help with it, but they identify what their priorities are, what their supports are, and what their barriers are. And then they start to problem solve with as much support as they need from you as the therapist. But it really kind of sheds light on the OT process to the client. So it's kind of like, if you've heard that word metacognition, which really kind of means thinking about thinking. If I said, when you are presented with a new activity, a task you've never done before, like maybe I buy you something at IKEA and I just give it to you in the box and be like, okay, good luck. You got to put this together. Hope you know what the tools are. You got to read the directions. What is your thought process there? And then later, if I asked you, what was your thought process? Like, sketch it out for me. Did you start out with overwhelm or excitement, and then if you ran into a problem, like you had one too many screws that you were supposed to have, what did you do? So that's metacognition. So kind of, I liken it to this theory because it helps the client learn to think about problem solving, not just problem solve, or not just have you problem solve for it. So it helps with their independence. So this is what I want you to think about. And in fact, in the blog post assignment for today, and this is why I asked you to make sure to have something to write on and something to write with for today's class session, I want you to sketch out what your river might look like. So you're going to need to, and I promise you, I do not care if it looks like a 3-year-old drew it. That's fine. You can do it on the back of a, envelope or something, but you're going to, kind of draw your river. And then, I don't know if you can see this because my background's blurred, but, and then draw the rocks and, label a couple of those, and the driftwood, and label a couple of those. And then don't forget about the banks and the bottom. So what are some supports in your life? And so you can look at in the textbook, or you can go back in this Prezi. I'll make sure the link is under today's course content directly to this Prezi, or you can go to that website that I linked and see what do those things mean, or look at your notes and sketch out your river, maybe thinking about what it looks like right now. So if you are the client in an OT session and I instructed you on what all these things are, and then said, let me see what your river looks like, including your barriers, your supports, the flow of it, looking at that. So I'm going to ask you to do that when we have your independent work time. But for now, what I want you to think about, and this kind of relates to the how a model the everyday task that you identified as maybe problematic or annoying you or bugging you. What's your thing? Like I gave the example um, the spray bottle. So what is that for you? And I'm going to actually put you guys into breakout sessions, and I want you to share with each other what was your annoyance, and then you can kind of problem solve, come up with at least 2 possible strategies that you could address, and you can kind of, chat with the group about it. At least 2 possible strategies that you can address with you can address the problem with. All right, so let's see, here we go. All right, I'm going to give y'all, let's see if each person has, I'm going to give you 20 minutes for this. So we'll come back. I'll call you back about 10 after, and then I'll explain the worksheet and the blog posts and all that. So, all right, you should see an invite coming to you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're still waiting on room 2, I think, but we got just about 20 seconds. And everybody will have to come back in, whether they're done or not. All right, so what I want you to think about in relation to that discussion, it relates back to what I talked about when I was given my spray bottle example, is that there are a lot of ways oftentimes to address a challenge or a problem. And the way in OT that you decide which method to choose depends on the theory that you are using, or maybe that's used in that particular setting, or that fits best with the client or client group. So that's why we did that what bugs you exercise there. And I have something on the worksheet that will relate to that as well. So let's see, we got everybody back. Okay, so if you will go on Blackboard and click on today's course content folder, that's session 22, the one in red, which I made it red to match the ladybug. Okay, first I'm gonna tell y'all what I think is a funny story about ladybugs. I like ladybugs a lot because when I was there's my video. When I was in high school, I was very much into science fair. I love science fair projects. And one year I decided I was going to test out what color ladybugs are most attracted to, because ladybugs are very good for you to have in a garden. They primarily feed on aphids, which are hazardous and detrimental to tomato plants and some other plants. So we want ladybugs around in our garden. So the idea was, can you guys make sure you're on mute? There's a lot of background noise from somebody's microphone. So I decided I was going to do this project to see what color ladybugs are attracted to. And I ordered, now this was way before the internet, of course, but I ordered 500 ladybugs in this mail order. And I mean, I had to like send a check through the mail and all that. And so a few weeks later, a big box with a container with some holes in it and 500 ladybugs arrived at my front door. I didn't really bring my parents in on this for some reason. I just thought, I was handling it. And so I set up 2 big aquariums in my bedroom and just divided the ladybugs between those. And in each one, I had a strip of red, green, yellow, and blue construction paper at the bottom. And I had a little container of sugar water on each of those color strips, because that's what, if they can't eat aphids, they wanted that sugar water. And so every day I would count it a couple times during the day, how many ladybugs in each tank were on the red, how many were on the green, how many were on the yellow, how many were on the blue, and mark it down. And I did that over a month-long period. But at the end of the month, I guess I was going in to refill one of the sugar water things, and I did not close the lid to the container all the way. And so when I left the bedroom, I came back later, half of them, the half in one tank, were all out. And they were all over my room, like hanging from the cord of the fan and all on the curtains and the window, and they were everywhere. And I kind of got in trouble for that one from the parents. But if you're wondering what the answer to that question is, in case you're a gardener, my hypothesis was that they would like green the most, because plants are, often green, but actually they liked red the most. So I guess they were looking out for other ladybugs, or for some reason, in my experiment, red was the clear winner. So that's why I like ladybugs, because it reminds me of that. So let's look at what I want you guys to spend the next 45 minutes doing. And this is going to count for your knowledge check number 3. First, you need to click on the attached files and you will download that worksheet. Then you're going to go through and fill in that worksheet, including you disregard that. So you go through and fill out the worksheet. Then once you get that done, you're going to write a 2 or 3 paragraph blog post on your blog about the CALA model and include how it relates to your own life. So don't write it like you're writing it to me, or maybe like a journal entry that only you're going to read. Write it like you're talking to an audience that doesn't know about the CALA model. So put a little bit of an overview of the theory. Maybe that could be your first paragraph, and then a photo of the drawing of your river, and then, a paragraph or 2 talking about that. And then, so you will then submit by clicking on KC number 3, you will submit the completed worksheet and a link to your blog post. And you have until noon to do that. So, I'm not wanting you to spend time outside of this class session doing that. Now, if you do run out of time, you can do that. I'll make it so it's not marked late until midnight tonight, but I think you should be able to finish it in 45 minutes. So that'll be within the confines of this class session. Any questions? All right, so it doesn't have to be perfect. You're just doing your best. I'm looking for your understanding of these models and the CALA model. And if you want to talk to other people, your roommates, or about what's on the worksheet to kind of get the creative juices flowing, you can, but make sure that you're doing that work and you're having the understanding there yourself. So it's going to hurt you if you just copy somebody's. You probably won't have a full understanding of this model. All right, well, with that, we can all log off, and I'm going to set you free to work on that. And then you have your assignment for tomorrow's session, which you actually have through Saturday night to watch the movie, and then Sunday night to complete the worksheet. And so then I will see you guys next week. Let me know if you have questions. And I'm going to be working on grading the stuff you're submitting. So, all right. Thank
So
you.
this is due today at noon, is what you said.
Yes. And
Okay.
if it's a little bit afternoon, I mean, it's just for participation credit. So I'm not going to mark you late. I just don't want you to spend too much time on it. That makes sense? Okay. All
And
right.
you want us to, and you want us to like include the worksheet
Yes. So the blog post and the worksheet, and there it's
and
just
the link to the blog. Okay.
yes, exactly. So it's just a complete or incomplete on the worksheet. The blog post, I'm basically going to grade it like that too, unless somebody just really halfway does it. But I mean, the way I expect people to do it, you'll just get the 10 points for that. So put effort into it. It's for your own good, but this ought to be easy points for everybody. So, all right. Yeah, go ahead.
For the picture of our river, do you want that in the blog or in the assignments tab?
In the blog.
Okay.
Okay. So if you're really struggling to figure out how to do that, you can just submit it to me, but it's going to make your blog post a lot better to do it that way. So if somebody stumbles across it, they can read it, they can see your example and so on. So reach out to peers if you're having trouble with the technical aspect of that. I bet some people have been doing this stuff already, so they should be able to help you. All right, I'm going to set you free. Good luck, everybody, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.